Welcome to NACD BoardVision, where leading boardroom advisors, governance professionals, and seasoned directors discuss critical issues related to your responsibilities in the boardroom.
Hi, I'm Christopher York Clark, publisher of NACD Directorship magazine. Welcome. This is BoardVision, and our guest today is Phyllis Deiso of McGladrey, a preeminent accounting firm for the middle market. Our subject today is also going to touch on our Blue Ribbon report on talent development, but it's going to go far beyond that. Phyllis, good to have you here today.
Thank you, Chris. It's always great to be here.
As always, as is my style, I'm going to jump right in and pull out as much insight as I possibly can in a short period of time. And one of the imperatives of that talent report, our Blue Ribbon Commission, touched on that everything, a company's hiring philosophy, the employee and incentive programs, and the corporate culture should all be aligned with the talent pipeline in that particular strategy. Based on your current client list, how do they best measure their talent and their talent development?
It's a great question, and I think there's also some insights in the Blue Ribbon Commission report. But I would say I'm an accountant and I deal with financial statements. And financial statements are often viewed as the language of global business. But financial statements are historic. They are a lagging indicator.
Rearview mirror.
Yes. And so I think today companies, in looking at talent management, rely a lot on lagging indicators. And why? Well, lagging indicators are historic. They are sometimes easier to measure and less subjective. So we look at things like employee surveys, employee engagement. We measure employee engagement through the employee survey. We look at turnover, especially turnover among our highest performers. We certainly should not ignore those. I think there's valuable information to be gleaned. However, we should also have a combination of predictive indicators. So for example, in looking at leadership in a company, how many leaders have successors who are currently ready internally to step into that role or ready in the near future. So some of those predictive indicators should form part of the Blue Ribbon Company's talent management assessment process. One of the things that boards seem to struggle with is candidly assessing the non-CEO strategic leaders. And while we have the once a year, and most companies have some once a year strategic initiative around its human capital, and there's an assessment of upper level strategic leaders, rarely is that assessment as candid as it needs to be for the board to really have a feel for what that talent pipeline is. And partially I like to think that's because we're nice people, but it's very difficult when you get a manager in a room, even an upper level manager in a company, who's required to talk about their people. And somehow that individual believes that any type of feedback that is less than glowingly positive is a bad reflection on them. And so it's hard to really get to the meat of that. What I would recommend we do, and certainly European boards or international boards struggle with this just as we do in the United States, and that is to be sure that the board calendar includes once a quarter some component of talent management, whether it be the pipeline, whether it be talent development. Now what I will say our non-US companies do sometimes better is they seem to have talent development embedded in their culture, a little bit more so perhaps than we do in the United States. And that may be a little unfair. Certain companies in the US are exemplary and world-class in talent development.
Not everybody can be American Express.
That's exactly right. So, and that's a great example. But I do think that they perhaps are more invested internally than we sometimes are.
Let's go to your forte, which is the middle market. Do they have the requisite time to do this type of deep dish analysis, to be the architect, because as you say, doing it annually doesn't work for anybody.
No. Again, I don't believe, and every company is different, and it starts with reports from management to the board, but the board saying, this is key to our future. It is a key part of our strategy. These are the risks, and how do we address those risks? And if the resources internally are not sufficient, it is not necessarily the answer to go out and expand the HR department, but use a laser approach, address those risks by hiring appropriate resources that specifically address the risk profile you've identified.
All right, I'm going to surprise you here. I want to put aside for a moment NACD's report on talent, and I want you to give kind of a bottom line closing on all of this discussion on talent and talent development and it being part of every component. How would you connect the dots with the talent issue with a company's risk profile?
Well, I think, again, it's up to the board. The board has an oversight responsibility, and so I think boards today are very sensitive to overstepping that, nor should they. And so it's a fine line between attempting to manage the non-CEO C-suite and really understanding what the talent pipeline is. But it is important that this be identified, it be assigned, it be measured using the appropriate metrics. And it's up to the board to ensure that it is there, it is assigned responsibility, and it is measured and talked about. I've mentioned before that, when we have our strategic initiatives, if it is an emerging market, I will guarantee you that almost every meeting, that emerging market is discussed in one form or another because it is so key to our future. But yet we're not discussing the people. We're not connecting the people to the execution of the strategy. Yet the success or failure of that strategy foundationally depends on the talent that is connected to the strategy. And so it really begins with the board and with directors.
Phyllis, thank you for truly connecting the dots.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here.
On behalf of NACD and McGladrey, thank you for viewing today. I'm Chris Clark, and this is BoardVision.